Hey guys, it's CS Joseph with csjoseph.life doing another episode for season 19. This is episode 12, how to cognitively develop INTJs or cognitive integration or the path to enlightenment or how to become like literally the greatest INTJ that walks the earth. This is the episode for you, season 19, episode 12. So we've been talking a lot about the various other of the 16 types, but this particular episode we're going to basically be discussing the path to enlightenment for INTJs, according to usual statistics that we see online. They are the second rarest of all of the types, aka the strategist, but we in the CSJ community refer to them as the ranger. And I think the reason why they're known as a ranger is because INTJs are probably some of the most independent, if not the most independent of all of the 16 types. And their level of independence is kind of like a ranger. And if we're going to utilize like a fictional comparison, INTJs would be kind of like rangers from, for example, Lord of the Rings. Aragorn, or who is known as Strider, he is a ranger according to the story. Someone who lives out in the wild, does their own thing, very independent, has the ability to master any skill, create any tool to help them get through any particular obstacle, etc. And that's essentially what an INTJ is, and that's why we utilize the ranger type. And if you want to like kind of understand the difference between like an INTJ and an ESFP, ESFPs are very up close and personal. That's why they're known as the duelist type. They like take their sword, their TE sword, and they're just they're fighting, up front, close and personal, etc. As they're like a swashbuckler, etc. But the INTJ looks at the ESFP and is like, you can enjoy that glory up front, close and personal in your little debate there with that person. But I'm going to do the wise thing and maybe attack from a distance, Here, you can enjoy your swords up close and personal, but I'm going to go use this cannon over here, or I'm going to go use this bow and arrow over here, or I'm going to use this sniper rifle over here and get the job done from a distance. No need to put myself at risk. I mean, apparently you want to. Okay, sure, go ahead, little ESFP. I mean, but honestly, I'm just going to be over here in my sniper's nest, my crow's nest over here, taking a look at what's coming from a distance and reaching it out and touching them a little bit, if you know what I mean. And that's kind of the INTJ Ranger-esque approach. And honestly, it's a sight to be seen because their NI hero combined with that TE parent auxiliary function, when it's fully developed, literally they become the physical walking manifestation of a sniper rifle, able to cut through any obstacle like a fiery laser and just kind of burn their way through through whatever obstacle or through to the end, etc. And kind of see it through as finisher types. And it's really interesting. The problem with INTJs, though, is that even though they have all this independence, even though they have this purpose in life where they exist to master any skill or master any tool or create the ultimate tool or the ultimate weapon or the ultimate system or the ultimate methodology or the ultimate way of doing things to accomplish XYZ goals, but it's ultimately mastery of a particular skill to provide the ultimate performance or efficiency or effectiveness in some capacity to achieve a goal, etc. While they do have all of these things that are attached to them as rangers, the problem is that oftentimes INTJs have no idea where to start. And that's what I'm hoping this episode will do for INTJs, is really give them a higher level of understanding for themselves to be able to take their own selves to the next level. I don't know how many times I've had INTJs in my life ask me straight up, Chase, what can I do to be the best version of myself? What can I do to reach the next level? What can I do to develop each of the four sides of my mind? What can I do to become the ultimate ranger, the ultimate duelist, the ultimate rogue, the ultimate knight, etc. Within the four sides of my mind? What can I do to be a peak performer, cognitively speaking, for my own self? And it's funny because for some reason INTJs have this achievement mindset that comes from their extroverted thinking parent, especially when their extroverted thinking parent is very mature. They have this point of view that it's all about that it's all about like arriving, it's so funny. I was actually talking to an INTJ recently who does not actually think he's an INTJ. He vehemently believes he's an ENTP, to the point where he just decided that he wanted to change his INTJ tag on the Discord over to ENTP, and I'm like, yeah, no, dude. No, no, you're an INTJ. I'm sorry, man. All you talk about is your personal achievement, because they're very achievement oriented. Whereas ENTPs, they don't really care about that unless they're like trying to like get something out of it to adhere to a different social objective of some kind. But at the end of the day, from an INTJ standpoint, it's all about achievement. It's all about arrival. And this guy, he's like telling me about some of his achievements and how he's going to arrive at a certain state, as it were. And I think that's the biggest lie that INTJs end up believing about themselves, is that because they're so achievement focused. This is why it's funny, because they'll be the first to claim that, like, oh, I don't care very much about credentials and whatnot, but they actually really do. They care about their certificates. They care about their diplomas. They care about their credentials, because to them, credentials are just a means to an end. They're just a tool that gives them the credibility and the recognition to actually be able to gain access to certain levels or areas because of the regard that they gain, or the respect that they gain from having those credentials, that they did not have before. I'm sorry, but if an INTJ is telling you, and also INTJs, stop lying to yourselves, but if an INTJ is telling you that they don't really care about credentials or achievements in that regard, they're lying. They're really lying. Because again, it's just a means to an end. They are using those credentials to gain for them what they need to get to the next place, etc. And that's fantastic. It really is, because they can master any skill. They can literally pick up a book, read about how to do it, and then actually do it. If they don't know computer programming, they can learn computer programming. I mean, the best example is Frank Abagnale. He never taught a college course in his life. He never had any credentials. And, this is why INTJs are like, hey, I don't care about credentials, because they intuitively know that they don't need credentials. They know that they have the internal ability to master any skill. I mean, Frank Abagnale, one of the greatest INTJ social engineers of all time, all he did was just read the next chapter in the textbook, and he taught from that chapter to the textbooks. And he just read one chapter ahead of the class. And that's how he hacked becoming a college professor, or faking being a college professor, even though he wasn't. Because even INTJs understand that systems and like college systems or systems for flying, etc., they're very arbitrary. And Frank Abagnale, through TE Parent, and INTJs through TE Parent, recognize that systems or rules or these limitations that people put on themselves are actually arbitrary. And because of how arbitrary they are, INTJs, aka Rangers, can recognize these systems as as tools that they could utilize to get from A to B to C, and to handle whatever objective or goal that they actually have themselves. And well, they don't have to be necessarily goal-oriented as a result, because it's all about being progress. If they're not getting progress in their life, or in anything, they're going to freak out. And, this is why they'd rather give multiple attempts to, reach that objective, instead of just planning all at once and then getting that objective one time. INTJs don't subscribe to the do it right the first time point of view, which is a very outcome or control based for point of view. But because they're movement, very progression focused, it's all about, I'm going to give as many attempts, I'm going to give it my best shot multiple times to try to see if I can get the objective, which is not wrong either. That's why they're very fast in everything that they do. But again, they see these arbitrary rules or these arbitrary systems as tools that they could utilize to exploit to get their advantage. And it's no different than nature. If INTJs have a really close relationship with nature, in as much as people are systems, nature is a system that they can ultimately hack and exploit to help them reach their goals, reach their objectives, which ultimately is to gain for themselves more treasure. And that's the purpose of their life. The purpose of their life is ultimately to seek treasure and to share it with others, but within the context of mastering any skill to reach the objective of gaining treasure for themselves and then choosing with whom to share it. That is the purpose of the of life for INTJs, which is exquisite because then everyone else can gain the benefit of their mastery of skills. Maybe an INTJ can discover a new chemical or discover a new tool or discover a new system or design a new methodology and share that with other people. That methodology itself becomes treasure. Treasure that they've gained for themselves, treasure that they've created that they could share with other people for other people's benefit, right? But there's a lot of times where, people don't really see that value in INTJs and instead just, consider INTJs selfish assholes when the reality situation is that while that can be the case sometimes, it's not always the case. It really depends on their maturity. It depends on how much experience that they have in their life, as a result. So, it's really important that we, that we recognize these things, about INTJs and like the direction that they're going in their lives. So with that being said, I highly recommend INTJs, once again, watch the film Catch Me If You Can, which talks about Frank Abagnale. It's exquisite. This is an INTJ social engineer hacking systems and people to gain information to give him, because he's ultimately a thief, a check fraudster. And, look at all the systems that he hacked in order to gain so much benefit. But then again, this plays into the whole Wayfair, stealing instead of earning themselves. Imagine an INTJ actually discovering a system that they can exploit that no one else has exploited, and then they exploit that system, or they create a system that they only allow themselves to exploit, and then they end up having their own original success. And that's part of the ENTP unconscious and its original. The problem is a lot of INTJs struggle with procrastination because they have no idea where to start, which is kind of ridiculous because you guys need to stop thinking about where to start in your life. What you need to be doing is looking at what other people are doing or look at what other people have done already. You don't have to start shit. You really don't. So stop trying to start things. Go look at what other people have done, just do it better. Or go or look at what multiple people have done in the same area within the same niche, right? It's all about niching INTJs. Find a specific niche or a subset of niches, right? And then look at what other people have done with those niches and do it better. That's all you have to do. Other people have already started for you. And then you could take what a whole bunch of other people have done through research, reading, seeing what other people are doing, and then at that point you can master the skill, and then you could create for yourself the ultimate tool, the ultimate system, and do it better than them. And it's your own system that you get to exploit for yourself and your own benefit, and no one else can take it away from you, provided you don't share it with other people. You see what I'm saying? Because you have to choose who to share your treasure with, right? INTJs, this is what you have to do, right? Why wouldn't you do that? So remember how important that is, INTJs, when you're going through your life. It's absolutely critical that you understand this, because then you don't have to worry about procrastinating anymore. The thing is, it's so easy for you to procrastinate when you're going to school, when you're at a job, because quite frankly, you don't care about school. You don't care about your job. You really just don't care. You don't care about how you've been trained. And that's not a bad thing, because it doesn't mean anything to you. See, school and the affiliative organizations for education and academia, those things don't really benefit you. That just benefits other people. But what about the things that benefit you? What do you, INTJs, really actually care about, right? What do you actually care about? And the faster, you need to seriously spend a few moments of your time, INTJs, and think about what actually matters to me. What can I independently do as the ultimate individualistic person of all of the 16 types? What do I actually want to do? What do I feel like doing? List out the top 10 things that you like to do and how you spend your time. Seriously, this is really, really important, and it's extremely basic because if you think about it, what percentage of my time am I spending on directly correlates to your area of success? Remember how I was talking about niching INTJs? One of the best ways for you to get to a point where you can have success in your life, how you can reach cognitive integration, how you can reach enlightenment is training your TE parent to understand the process of niching, okay? So in terms of success, according to Tony Robbins, there are 3 prime niches that people want to buy things or people desire or people want, or areas that an INTJ could improve or perform in. And that is health, wealth, and relationships. Okay? Now, INTJs, you guys have FE tricksters, so relationships are probably not going to be your thing. But you do have extroverted sensing inferior, which means you can definitely make some huge strides in health. And you also have TE parent, which can help a lot of people in wealth. And then you could actually combine health and wealth together for who knows whatever, and then focus on those niches. And then pick which one of those are really important to you. It's not that hard. Extroverted sensing, you can get into the fitness crowd. Extroverted thinking, you get into the wealth generation crowds. What if it's like investing in the stock market? What if it's cryptocurrency? What if it's some scientific research of some kind? What if you're combining health and wealth simultaneously, and then you're creating like a special chemical or a pill that you could use to heal somebody of some ailment, and you could not only sell it and make a bunch of money, but you're also helping people at the same time. Have you ever even thought of that, right? It's all about niching. But how can an INTJ do niching? Niching comes through reaching the first stage of cognitive development in your ego. Like, it's not that hard. So we'll talk about niching in a second. Niching comes from your extroverted thinking parent, but more on that in a few minutes. So in order to identify a ranger or an INTJ, in case you guys don't know how to identify yourselves, go through the type grid. You want to look at your communication style, aka interaction style. You guys are direct, which means you choose your role in the conversation. It's like telling someone, go get me some water, instead of saying, I like water, right? It's funny, I actually had an INTJ yesterday tell me about his children, where his child came up to him and said, Daddy, I like oranges. And he's like, good for you, I like oranges too. And then he walked off, right? And then his child got upset about it. But his child was being informed, not direct. If his child was direct, his child would have said, Daddy, can you get me an orange, please? You see what I'm saying? That's a lot more direct. Whereas, it's informed, just making a blanket statement, I like oranges, than expecting someone to get you an orange, right? That's the difference between direct and informed. That's why INTJs are direct, because they're just like, wow, that's like really dumb. I wouldn't do that. But someone like me as an ENTP, I'm very informative, and I do that all the time. So, that's kind of what I do. So what am I supposed to do? You know what I'm saying? So they're responding. INTJs prefer people to come to them instead of them going to other people. They like to be valued enough or thought highly enough that people would come to them and keep them and loop them into things. They always need to be in the loop. They're very movement oriented, which means progression, which we've already talked about. Talking about giving multiple attempts instead of planning everything for one attempt, to try to get that one attempt to work, because they don't want to spend the time and energy for multiple attempts. But the thing is that if you think about it, it's really the same thing. You're still going to spend the same amount of energy regardless if you're control versus movement, aka outcome versus progression, because while you're spending all that time planning for that one really good outcome, you could have already had multiple attempts and probably met your mark at that point in time. So the multiple attempts could be potentially faster, you see, because there's less planning involved. Instead, it's just doing instead of actually planning, whereas an outcome person is more planning and less doing, and you're only doing one time. That's like a primary difference. You see what I'm saying? So that's a big deal, right? So a direct responding movement means they're a finisher, which means they are focused on finishing, but they have a hard time starting things. But we already talked about the process of niching to be able to get over that issue for INTJs, okay? Pretty simple, right? Well, going beyond that, their temperament is also pragmatic, systematic, and abstract. Abstract means that they're all focused on the what if, they're focused on the possibilities, not necessarily what is. They're very systematic. INTJs are always focused on the best way to do something and identifying the best skill or the best method to help them reach their objective. The best way of doing something does not necessarily mean the best goal, right? Or the best outcome. That's why it's different from outcome-based or control, whereas systematic is more the best way to get to the goal or the outcome. So stop confusing both of them. I'm tired of hearing people being confused about them, and it's funny how INTJs are often confused by it. And it's like, stop, you don't need to be. And then they are very pragmatic because they're the most independent of all the types. Freedom, my freedom. And and because of that, they prefer to work alone, not necessarily in a team, for example. So that's their communication style, their disposition, aka their temperament. Cognitively speaking, they're very wind and fire, but mostly fire focused. Fire, the will of fire, and then the wind of being able to make other people comfortable around them, give other people a good experience, perform really well for others. And they're also bow and spear. Bow and spear means all about statistics, data, and research. The spear is also like, that piercing heart, that moral high ground, those high moral principles that the INTJ could utilize to create a philosophy around their skills, a philosophy around their work, and the moral principles associated with that, because they want other people to think highly of them so that they are a very good person. And the spear represents that, bow and spear. Within that approach. And quadra-wise, they are wayfarers, which we already talked about, treasure hunters focused on gaining for themselves treasure and then choosing with whom to share it with. Just remember, INTJs, when you're using treasure and when you gain treasure for yourself, when you're choosing to share with treasure, remember, do not believe that you can just trade your performance for loyalty. That's not always going to work. You can't just trade your treasure away for loyalty either. That's also not going to work. You can't just do that. What you have to do is go from like the parable of the talents, like in the Bible, for example, utilize the parable of the talents as an example, is that you share a small piece or a little bit of your treasure with certain people to see what they do for it. And if you see you're getting a return on investment from sharing your treasure with others, you will truly know if they're loyal. You will truly know if they are someone who's worth having a relationship with or doing a business with. Because let's be honest, you also have to make sure that your performance is really well enough that you can actually produce that treasure with which to share with. If you're lacking performance, you can't get all butthurt that all of a sudden that person has decided to abandon you because you didn't actually provide them any actual treasure or any performance to begin with. And I'm not telling you to trade performance or treasure for loyalty. I'm telling you to, instead of trading it and then expecting it, which is technically a covert contract through your ISFJ superego, maybe you should consider it as an investment. And remember, sometimes when you invest, you can lose your investment. Think about that. They are investments. You want to do the ones that have the higher return on investment, guys. It's not that hard. Return on investment. Always think about ROI when it comes to people. Because I get INTJs, you don't understand social interaction. Let me give you the secret to social interaction for INTJs right now, and that is unequivocally return on investment. Think of it this way: curse versus blessing. A curse is when you put an investment in something and you get less in return. That's a low ROI. That's actually a negative ROI. That's a curse. A blessing is you get more back than what you put into your investment. That's a high return on investment. That is definitely a relationship to have. Think return on investment, guys. Here's the thing. If you're not getting a good ROI with a person in your life, that means, INTJs, you're being manipulated. That means you're being taken advantage of. Maybe you should door slam those people and get those people out of your life because they're just pumping you for your treasure. You see, remember, you can't just trade treasure or performance and expect loyalty from other people. I get it, INTJs, that you're so afraid of being abandoned. I get it. I understand. But if you trade your treasure, if you trade your performance for loyalty, that's not how it works. You can't expect that. You have to see it as people as managing an investment portfolio. That's literally how you treat people. That is how you develop your FE trickster. So you can get over that. So your understanding of people is, am I getting more out of a person than what I'm putting in? Am I getting good ROI? The higher the IOI, the better the relationship, the better the friend, the better the romantic situation. It's all about return on investment. Think about it. Curse versus blessing. It's not that hard, INTJs. You need to be viewing people in this system, right? And this is necessarily important for your cognitive development. We're going to be talking a little bit more about this later. So understand that, okay? So then, so from a wayfarer standpoint, it's all about sharing treasure, but choosing who to share your treasure with wisely. We already talked about purpose in life. We already talked about your guys' four sides of your mind. Your ego is the ranger, your subconscious is the duelist, your unconscious is the rogue, and your superego is the knight. Those are your four sides of the mind. And now let's talk about cognitive gateways for you guys. Cognitive gateways work like this. Your brain, your mind is literally a farm. We're like hashtag farmvilling it right now, okay? Like literally we're farmvilling. So Farmville, from this point of view, you have 4 fields, okay? So you have the ego up there, right? That's one field. You have your unconscious right here. That's another field. Way over there is the superego. That's another field. Let me get my awesome... Okay, no, I guess I'm not going to get my wand then. But here's the thing. Your superego is another field. Your subconscious is another field. Your ego is your main field. Your ego has is the most consistent return on investment for you. You have all of your water. It's irrigated. It's well done in your ego field, and your ego is growing. And how cognitive transition works, you can open the floodgates and get all of your water drained from ego into another side of your mind, whichever one you want, right? And then all of your water is on that side, and you're super hyper-focused on that side of your mind. And that water is flowing really quickly through the other side of the mind, which is not a really good thing, because that's called a chaotic transition, when the water is chaotically going through that irrigation system really fast and filling up the other side of your mind super quick. It's too quick. It's expedient. It's not meaningful, right? That could be a problem. So, watch out for that. It's really not good. So, based on that, and as you're filling up the other sides of your mind with the water that you have in your ego, sometimes you can open up all the floodgates and then balance your water through different sides of mind. Maybe you want the ego and unconscious to have your water, the water of your soul, basically occupying and watering those crops. But like your subconscious, for example, you're not really good at that particular plant. You're trying to cultivate it. You're not very good at it. You don't have as much experience with it, but you know that once you do, that it'll actually have a higher yield than your ego. And then your unconscious is something similar that, while it can be a little bit harder, it's actually something you have to do. You have to grow it because the government is forcing you against your will, or your family is forcing you against your will, your community is forcing you against your will. It's like where you're being taxed, for example, that you as a farmer are required to grow a certain crop in your unconscious, so you just kind of have to deal with it. But the subconscious is where you want to go. And then there's the superego, which is like the dream, the ultimate dream. The problem is that you completely lack the experience, because all the experience that you would need to be able to grow the superego crop appropriately, to have the ultimate yield, to have the ultimate return on investment in your life, you would have to master your subconscious field and your unconscious field and your ego field to be able to actually, and all that experience gained, to actually know how to precisely grow the superego field, for example. And how to do that appropriately. And all of the gateways, the irrigation gateways, are your cognitive gateways, which are your hero function, which will become the warrior function as it's developed. And then you have your inferior function. That's the second gateway. Your third gateway is your villain or ally function, aka the nemesis. And then your final gateway is the demon gateway, which can become the angelic gateway. And it's all about the level of speed with which the water is draining from, into these various irrigation gateways, into these fields, etc. And like I said, you could spread your water out across all 4, but then you might be a little mediocre at that point, or you could really focus on a particular side of your mind, or you could be in 2 or 3, etc. It depends on how you divide your water. That's how cognitive transition actually works, okay? Using this model of a farm, right? That's how it works, okay? So at that point, you can understand, this is kind of the development. So this is how the gateways work with the 4 sides of the mind, etc. Gosh, I literally might be able to get this in under an hour. Gosh, I hope so. I'm just kind of trying to be as precise as possible and just spit it out as quickly as possible, because I know you INTJs are triple movement and you want to get this, get me the information and you're getting my belly. You know what I'm saying? Except more of your brain and not actually your belly, but that's like a whole nother thing. Anyway, moving on. So the first gateway is into the ego, is your hero function, and your hero function is kind of given to you by default within your mind. It is given to you by default, and you get this at an early age, but still your ego is lacking in itself. And here's the thing: the superego really doesn't respect. It doesn't respect the other sides of your mind. It wants to have nothing to do with it. And remember, the path to enlightenment is ultimately integrating all 4 sides of your mind. The path to enlightenment is being that ultimate farmer who is able to have absolute mastery of all 4 fields and getting a really good return on investment with all 4 fields, and all the self-discipline and hard work to cultivate those 4 fields within one's soul to be able to gain the most benefit for themselves and everybody else within the community that your farm, aka your mind, actually exists, right? Using this farming model for you INTJs. So based on that, it's really important. It's extremely important. Wow, I'm just like on fire today. So with that being said, um, so your hero is the default, right? And then you start to develop it. The problem is that the superego crop, you realize that in order to master the superego crop, you need to gain for yourself personal responsibility. You need to gain for yourself humility. You need to gain for yourself wisdom in order to be able to master the superego crop. Now, some INTJs think they're hot shots and they decide, well, I can actually go right for the superego because that's going to give me the most yield over time, and I want to go for my dreams right now. I want to go for it right now. I grew up thinking I could be a fireman, so I'm going to go be a fireman right now, etc., for example. And then they completely ignore the subconscious, they completely ignore the unconscious, and all of a sudden the superego, everything blows up in their face. Because they end up creating like a nuclear weapon instead of nuclear power within the superego, and then it blows up in their face, and then people die, and it's a huge problem. Then they end up passing judgment on other people. They end up finding the innocent guilty, and then they commit acts of punishment and violence, potentially, in some capacity, to other people, to innocent people. This is what this demon does. The demon ends up finding the innocent guilty and then takes out revenge upon people that don't actually deserve that revenge, right? Which will then blow up and cause a huge problem and actually set the INTJ back in their development within their life. And it will cause everyone to have no desire for the INTJ's performance, no desire for their treasure, and they will not be loyal to the INTJ and leave the INTJ behind and alone ultimately. That INTJ will not have any reputation or status with anyone, and that reputation or status will follow them around for the rest of their life. It's just as bad as having like a sex offender label attached to you, INTJs, and that's literally what will happen if you go for your superego, something similar to that. Or when people say, you'll never work in this town for again, you might want to believe them, because that's what happens if you indulge in ISFJ's superego too quickly. Because remember, the superego is known as the superfluous ego. It's the piece of your mind that is trying to replace itself with the ego and ultimately become the new you, a very evil, dark twin, evil twin of yourself, because it has no respect or no like for the other sides of the mind, because it sees the other sides of your mind as beneath it. Right? Because it's like, wow, they're not at my level. They're not at my level of power. And of course, yeah, the superego is powerful, and you want to go do the expedient thing, make that Faustian deal with the devil so that you could borrow the ISFJ superego's power and then get revenge on all those people that have ever harmed you in your entire life, when the reality of the situation is you are literally in the middle of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you are actually the cause of those people mistreating you, and you're not even aware of that because you're ignorant. That's right. You are so ignorant that you're not even aware of how you literally caused those people to harm you, and then you're trying to get revenge on them with your superego. Wow, that's effective. No wonder your life is cursed. Maybe you should probably fix that, INTJs. Maybe you should, right? So remember, keep that in mind. It's super important. It's absolutely critical. If you want the superego to integrate with you, which is what you need in order to reach enlightenment, and in order to reach that level of integration, because the four sides of your mind, those four fields, are disintegrated, and you have to build the irrigation system and make sure that that water isn't just flowing out of a pipe, but it's actually very managed and controlled. You have to get the equipment in there. You have to get the dishes dug. You have to put in the work. Just like everybody else, INTJs, there is no quick route. But hey, if you want to take the quick route and get that Faustian deal with the devil, it's like, yeah, sure, I'll give you what you want, but, I'll give you an inch, but I'm going to take a mile in exchange. That's literally what it's like living with the superego, and you will set yourself back. You will not get return on investment. It will not be a blessing. It will be a curse that follows you around as a permanent mark for the rest of your life. To the point where you start thinking about yourself, it's like, I actually had a chance. I could have gone all the way, but then, I screwed it up, and then I lost that opportunity, and now because of that, I was not able to reach that high level in my life, and I'll never have that opportunity ever again. Yes, you burned your chance, right? And at that point in time, it's like, well, maybe you should like take some self-evaluation there and realize where you actually stand within your cognitive development so you can actually become a better person, right? Very necessary, right? So how do you deal with this? In order to reach integration, you have to grow your fields in a certain way. And honestly, like the ego is no exception. Most people think that you have the ego and it's mostly developed because it is what it is. But a person doesn't really develop their ego until adolescence, really, because that's when their sin nature is fully formed. That's when their superego is like, it has become into existence. It's still it's still immature, or just like the other sides of mind are immature. But the ego itself is beginning the maturation process in adolescence. And that's when you can really start taking control of your hero functions gateway, right? And when you're in the hero function, that's fantastic. The problem is that I have my gateway. You have something called cognitive looping, right? And this is something Dave Superpowers talks about a lot, but my mentors and I were aware of the concept years back. And it is a concept that is throughout, that is available throughout the community, etc. But the concept basically is that the parent function is underdeveloped, because think about it. When you're developing your functions as a child or as a person, they develop first. Your hero function develops first, followed by your child function, because those are the two optimistic, those are the two primary functions of your ego. And then your inferior function, your insecurity, starts to form next, because that is what is attached to your hero on a cognitive axis. For some reason, everyone out there in the MBTI blogosphere, etc., or the Carl Jungian blogosphere, believes that the auxiliary function, aka the parent function, actually develops second. This is wrong. This is absolutely incorrect. The parent function, aka the auxiliary function, is the final function to actually develop in the ego. And that's where a person's sense of personal responsibility comes from, okay? This is absolutely necessary. And we're going to give a specific concrete examples to how that works within the mind of the INTJ in a second. But the reason why it's the last function to develop, it's because the child function was the second primary or optimistic function within the ego to actually develop. So then its axis, which is the parent auxiliary function, it becomes the last function to be developed. That's why it goes in this order: hero, child, and then the hero's axis, and then the child's axis, which is the auxiliary parent function. And oftentimes, the parent function is not there to run interference between the hero or the child, between the two. Otherwise, they start cognitively looping. So then the INTJ ends up living this selfish life of, I am only going to do what I feel like. I'm only going to make decisions based on my mood or what I want. And they get insanely impulsive. It's all about their mood, and then they end up wanting the wrong things, and then they end up, for example, they could end up really, really fat, or they could end up really, really dumb, or they could end up in like insanely procrastination. What I mean by dumb, I mean like procrastinating in such a way where they never actually get anything started or never actually get anything completed, and they literally become Mr. Half-ass, right? Mr. Half-baked for their life, while the time that their parent function is not developed. And it's mostly because, like I was saying earlier, they don't know where to start. And here's why they don't know where to start. They can see what other people are doing, but they can't figure out how those people are doing it. They don't understand the system. Remember, the INTJ ego is systematic. Primarily systematic is the INTJ. Well, if they're systematic and I can't figure out where to start because I don't know the best way to start, maybe it's because you haven't spent any time aspiring and looking at what other people are doing. Or maybe it's because you, as an INTJ, are irresponsible because you're cognitive looping, because you have your hero function and your child function in la-la land, and you don't have a parent function to get in the middle of the hero, because the hero literally picks up the child function and places that child function on its shoulder, literally places the child function on its shoulder and is flying around, saving the world, etc. And that's a serious problem. And then the child is learning from the hero. And there's a lot of collateral damage from the hero because the child wants to be like the hero one day, right? The parent is supposed to step in and protect the child from the hero's influence because the hero can be irresponsible. How many times have you guys heard anti-hero wanting the wrong thing or wanting too much? How many times have you heard TI hero being so arrogant and so dismissive and so dismissive of other people and deciding not to listen to others? How many times have you struggled with that? even though they're TI hero and they should be the most correct of us all, right? Because they're TI hero. No, they're not. TI hero is probably at the highest risk of having their mind in an echo chamber. That's why TE parent exists, because TE parent is supposed to get TI hero out of out of that echo chamber, out of their personal bias, out of making decisions from last known input. But the only way TE parent's going to do that is if TE parent is responsible. And how does TE parent get responsible? How do you grow your TE parent? You grow your TE parent through research. Reading nonfiction, INTJs. Oh, but you're so lazy, and you're like, you're so impatient that you can't actually sit down and read a book, that you can't actually do the research, something that you actually want to do, that you can't push yourself to actually have the willpower or the desire to actually sit still and actually read. Well, if that's the case, go to csjoseph.life/reading, download an Audible free account, which you get an automatic free, literally a free audiobook, and you can start listening to books. Which book would I recommend you guys start with? No More Mr. Nice Guy would be a great start. Or how about The 50th Law by Robert Greene, which is the most important law of power. Maybe you should read that first, right? You need to be responsible. How else in your life are you going to be able to niche? Remember me telling you about niching, health, wealth, and relationships, and seeing what other people are doing in niches that interest you so that you could create methodology, systems, mastery of skills according to those niches and actually contribute in terms of areas of health and wealth, for example, and improve other people's lives so you could become the best INTJ you were ever supposed to be? How are you going to do that? If you don't freaking research. Oh, but you're too impatient because you're too impulsive, because it's all about my feelings. You'll never have my status, my titles. You'll never have good status and titles in your life if you can't get off your ass because you're too impatient to actually read a book or to listen to an audiobook. Because at least, while at your dead-end job that you don't give a shit about, you could actually be listening to an audiobook while you're commuting. Or if you're a janitor somewhere, you could be listening to it while you're janitorizing or whatever you do. Wow, I literally invented that word, janitorize. Whatever. It doesn't matter. You, INTJs, have the NI hero power of choice. You always have a choice. You have to make the right choice. And you are literally choosing to be impatient, which is making you weak. Your lack of research and your lack of reading is making you weak and ineffective and not able to perform. You should always be in some kind of program or reading some kind of book every single day for your entire life. But you decide not to because I'm not in the mood for it. Or you decide not to because that's not what I want to do. Well, and then you get all butthurt and all depressed because you're procrastinating because you don't know where to start. I'm telling you exactly where to start. Start niching and start doing the research. Because then at that point, you'll see what other people are doing in certain niches, and then you start researching how to do it, and then you realize you could do it better than them because you're INTJs, because guess what? You can do it better than everybody else anyway. So why wouldn't you? Wake up. Gosh, I can't stand INTJs who are this way. I know an INTJ. In fact, I got an INTJ on staff. He's absolutely fantastic. This INTJ, if he's never done it before, he don't care. He's just going to read about it and he'll figure it out. And he'll use his progression, movement-oriented interaction style and just be like, okay, well, I'm going to attempt. Okay, that didn't work. I'm going to attempt again. Okay, that didn't work. I'm going to attempt again. That didn't work. I'm going to attempt again. That didn't work. Okay, I need to go back, do some reading. Okay, did some reading. Great. I'm doing another attempt. Okay, it's starting to work. Do a little bit more reading. Oh, I'm going to attempt again. It's starting to work. Do a little bit more reading. Ding, 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 ding. I got it. Yes, mastery of any skill. Oh, yeah. And then he just gets better and better and better and better and better. He's so much more developed than the rest of you. That's the reason why he's on my team. Think about that for a second, right? And then he has the status and reputation that comes with literally being the master, because he actually is. And he's fantastic at being able to achieve within the confines of what this team needs from him. He's absolutely fantastic, and he performs very, very well. What are you doing, huh? Why can't you get off your ass and stop being impatient, huh? Because you do realize that your impatience is creating laziness, right? You do realize your impatience is creating, a huge obstacle in your life that you're choosing. You are literally choosing to be impatient. You could be doing other things while listening to things at the same time. Or if you can't focus, then maybe when you're sitting on your toilet taking a shit, you could actually have some books there that you could be reading, so at least while you're taking a shit, you can make yourself useful and actually get some reading in for once and start researching, because for some reason you are absolutely against being in a state of continuous improvement or Kaizen. What you need to be in that state. Remember what we were talking about, that other INTJ who's all about, ooh, I'm just trying to arrive. I'm just trying to arrive. No, that's not how it works, INTJs. You actually want to reach enlightenment. You actually want to become the best version of yourself. You need to be committed to Kaizen, which means continuous improvement. There is no such thing as arriving to integration. There is no such thing as arriving to enlightenment. Because let me tell you, the state of enlightenment technically doesn't exist. The state of enlightenment really is Kaizen. It means continuous improvement. You become enlightened as soon as you commit yourself to continuous improvement. And how the hell are you going to do that if you can't even be patient enough to read? Or at least do audiobooks. Like, explain that to me. You guys are so irresponsible when you do this, and I'm tired of it. Now, the responsible INTJ, like the INTJ on my staff, on my team, he's really responsible, and he handles all that reading. That's fantastic. And then because that, his performance goes up, because he is responsible in his ego, and a responsible INTJ is willing to do the research. That's the difference. And that's what the superego is trying to get the ego to figure out, so that the superego can actually have some respect for the ego, to be willing to be integrated. Then at long last, the INTJ ego is responsible. Yay! Hopefully they figure that out just before they move out of their home, of their parents. See, INTJs, you're really behind in your development if you haven't figured that out before you even moved out of your parents' house, hopefully before you're 20. Huh? I wonder how many of you are really that behind in your development. I wonder. But at long last, the superego at this point in this INTJ's life is like, yeah, your ego's doing pretty good. You're pretty responsible. Too bad you're foolish. Too bad you're arrogant still. Not really willing to work with you. Not willing to be integrated. I'm not going to lend you my power because I have a lot of power to give. And I ain't giving it to you unless you want to make a deal for it. But then I'm going to give you an inch of my power and I'll take a mile of everything else you have. Right? But it's like, hey, at least you're responsible. But too bad you're foolish and arrogant. Well, let's move on to the ESFP. How to develop the ESFP. Remember, the second gateway, because we just talked about the hero gateway, which is trying to generate responsibility. The second gateway, extroverted sensing inferior, the INTJ is afraid of performing badly. This is why INTJs have this whole adage online of thinking about sex instead of having sex, because INTJs are so afraid of performing badly at sex that they'd rather think about sex than actually have sex. That's really annoying. This is why INTJs prefer to be with SI child and SI inferiors, because those types are very happy for SE inferior, because they know that SE inferior seems to overperform because it's always trying to overcompensate. And because of that, it ends up creating an amazing sexual performance for SE inferior, and when they become SE aspirational. That's literally how it works. So NPs end up liking and loving to have relationships with INJs specifically as a result of that. The problem is that INTJs are very afraid. They're afraid of performing badly. They're afraid of performing badly in front of other people. So then they choose to not perform. So then they are becoming the thing that they're trying to avoid. Hashtag self-fulfilling prophecy, bro. Are you actually living your life appropriately? Remember, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. If you're not actually taking any shots, what are you doing? Guys, the SE inferior turning into aspirational, this is exactly how you do it right here. Aiming high and missing is better than aiming low and hitting. Think about that. How are you going to aspire to extroverted sensing inferior if you're not aiming high? You have to humble yourself and realize that you're not all that good in a bag of chips. You're not actually that great. You're not actually that important. And it's only at that point you figure that out, then all of a sudden you can get over your fear. I'm really insecure about my performance. I have performance anxiety. You're not going to get over your performance anxiety until you accept that you're bad at performance. You have to get to acceptance. And it's through that acceptance of the fact that you're not good at performing, at that point you are showing humility. Because an arrogant INTJ has this underdeveloped ESFP subconscious who ends up performing poorly, but then they cover up their poor performance with pride. And then people are like, wow, he's got a huge ego for someone who performs so badly. And you don't even know that's how you come off to other people, INTJs. This is why your superego won't have anything to do with you, because it's like you're way too arrogant. You're always covering up your performance anxiety with pride. I can't stand this. And that's why your ISFJ superego is like, whoa, I am like so uncomfortable with that. You're so gross to me right now. I'm going to go over here. Your literal superego thinks you're gross. Yeah, that's right, INTJs. Your superego thinks you are gross because of how prideful and arrogant you are. Until, of course, you accept that you're just bad at performance. Accept it. Stop being afraid of being bad at performance. Accept that you are bad at performing. You are bad at performing. But then, only then after you know that you are bad at performing, then you can humble yourself and realize that, like everybody else, you need to practice. Because practice makes perfect. And this is how an INTJ gains the ability to master any and every skill. The problem is that once you master a skill, if you stop using that skill, you lose it. So you have to use it or lose it. So remember, your mind is like a little bookshelf. You could read a lot of books sometimes with your skills. All those skills are books on the shelf. But if you add a book, if you add a skill at bookshelf, another one gets pulled off. You only have enough space in there because your extroverted sensing inferior, aka extroverted sensing aspirational, is still short-term memory access. So you only have as much as you only have a limited amount of space within that random access memory in your head to be able to fit in certain skills within that random access memory. I suggest you use it wisely. Maybe you'd be able to use it wisely if you're more responsible with your TE and researching what other people are doing and figuring out how to do it better, so that you can niche properly, so you can plan properly, instead of just spinning your wheels everywhere like some ESFP egos do with their NI inferior, never knowing what they want to do. I wonder how that works. Right? Maybe you guys should like be on top of that and shit. Maybe. That'd be nice. So, it goes on. You master any skill because practice. You humble yourself, realize with your performance anxiety that you're not good at performance, but understand with your NI hero, you can be amazing at performance if you humble yourself to the point and realize that you need to practice just like everybody else. But here's the thing. No one benefits more from practice than extroverted sensing inferior. Nobody. Nobody benefits more from practice. You will always get the maximum benefit, INTJs, from practicing, and that you can move from skill to skill to skill until you find the skills that you want to master. And once you achieve mastery of those skills will bring you treasure. You could create tools with them. You could create systems and methodologies that you yourself can exploit instead of stealing somebody else's system or methodology or stealing someone else's treasure, because you're able to do it yourself and make it on your own. And it's yours and it belongs to you, and then you get to have the honor of choosing who to share it with. And you can make those investments and have better relationships with people, right? That's what it's all about, okay? You have to humble yourself. Humble yourself enough to be willing to practice. Humble yourself enough to be willing to take your fat ass to the gym. Think about it. You have to be humbling yourself well enough to put yourself in a program. You have to humble yourself well enough to be willing to read a book. You have to humble yourself and recognize that you are actually inferior at performance. But humble yourself enough to know that when you practice, then you will become the person who outperforms literally everybody at anything that you set your mind to. You have this capability within. What the hell are you doing, INTJs? What the hell? Wake up. Humble yourself. And then your superego will lift you up. Your superego will like, wow, he's responsible and he's humble. This is great, but he's still foolish. Not interested in working with them. And then moving on to the third gateway, the villain and the ally, extrovert intuition, where the INTJ's worry is, where the INTJ ends up worrying about other people betraying them. Maybe if the INTJ was making investments in other people and investing their treasures in other people, instead of expecting an immediate return on investment and knowing that the return on investment is going to be variable with other people, the INTJ would be like, yeah, some people, instead of expecting a return on investment with every single person they come into contact with as if their self-importance of their FI child was super high, That's just not going to work. Oh, and by the way, rewinding a little bit, going back to the ESFP subconscious, when you've humbled yourself and started to be able to practice, at that point your inner child is no longer overvaluing yourself. I don't know how, because when an INTJ is prideful, that FI child is overvaluing itself. The FI child becomes the FI parent in the ESFP subconscious. That FI parent is more responsible with how the INTJ is valuing themselves, because the INTJ has let go of their pride and realized that they need to practice like everybody else, because even ESFP egos understand that. So what makes you different, INTJs? What makes you different? So remember, unlocking the parent function in the ego, there you go. Responsibility gained, one notch towards the path to enlightenment, one notch towards the path to continuous improvement. And then ESFP, developing the FI parent, the ESFP subconscious, boom. I just reached humility. I'm practice makes perfect. I'm mastering these skills, and I am performing and outperforming everybody else as a result, because I accepted that I was inferior in terms of performance to everyone else, and I am actually doing something about that because I am practicing like everyone else. Thank God that at least I get the benefit of practicing more than anybody else, and I can actually outperform everybody else. But at least you've humbled yourself with your FI parent and are properly valuing yourself as an INTJ for once, which is allowing your superego to actually work with you. But then it's no different with the unconscious ENTP. Now we're going back into the unconscious ENTP. So worried that other people are going to betray you. So worried that other people aren't going to want you anymore. So worried that people are just going to abandon you. Yeah, well, it happens. So instead, you need to see people as opportunities to invest your treasure into and see which ones give you return on investment. The ones that give you ROI, those are the ones who do it. You can't just trade your treasure and your performance to other people and expect something of equal value in return. That's not going to happen. You have to see people as either curses or blessings. Some people are going to give you more in ROI back. Some people are going to give you less in ROI back. You need to understand which ones actually will do that, and then choose your friends accordingly. You are so unaware, INTJs, of other people's feelings. You're only aware of how you feel, and thus you have no concept of social interaction typically. This is how you manage social interaction. Follow that system, and I guarantee you, you will be successful, right? So with that being said, you have to start developing your critical function, because it's very foolish for you to just assume that everyone's going to eventually not want you anymore. Because if you just assume that, that basically means you're not going to perform as well. That means you're not going to share your treasure. That means you're actually creating a situation where you're going to get a lower return on investment with other people, because you're already mentally preparing for the time that they're going to decide to spontaneously not want you anymore. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, INTJs. It's a serious self-fulfilling prophecy. What are you going to do about it? How about you make yourself desirable, so by having this ROI system instead of a trading system. Don't make it a binary trading system. I perform for you, or I give you treasure, aka you give me loyalty. No. You need to look at it this way. I perform with you, I give you treasure, and I get a return on investment in the form of loyalty. And there's levels of loyalty. Sometimes it's lower than your return, or lower than your investment. Sometimes it's higher than your investment. And view people in the range of curse versus blessing, right? That's the wise way. But you have to change your beliefs, because your beliefs are incorrect. Your beliefs come from your extroverted thinking parent. If it's irresponsible, your beliefs are going to be worse. But even if your extroverted thinking parent is responsible, your beliefs still need to be verified, because you need to be acting in accordance to the truth. Because it's not exactly true that people are going to spontaneously unwant you, unless you're treating them like they're going to, and then they actually are, which becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And you're like, then your TI critic is like, foolish about it. It's like, yeah, see, I was right. I knew they were going to leave me. I knew they were going to abandon me. I knew they're not going to want me anymore. When the reality of the situation is, you were treating them in such a way as if they actually were. And it's your own damn fault, right? How about you actually verify all of your beliefs, especially your beliefs about other people? One of the ways to do this is use the ROI system instead of the trading system when it comes to people. It's not that hard. It's literally not that hard, right? So make sure that you're going in that direction. I cannot stress enough how important this is. I cannot stress enough how important this is. Recognize that it is your responsibility to do this. You have to verify all of your beliefs. You will not be able to develop your TI critic until you verify your beliefs. Your beliefs have to be in line with the truth. And if they are not in line with the truth, then you're no good to anyone, and then you're just going to be living your life like a fool instead of someone who has wisdom. Because a wise INTJ is the INTJ that verifies all of their own beliefs, right? It's absolutely necessary. If you want to gain wisdom, verify your beliefs and stop treating people as if they're always going to not want you anymore and abandon you. Instead, treat people with proper performance and proper treasure sharing through an ROI system and not some arbitrary binary trading system, because the trade is never going to work. You're never going to get equal back than what you put in someone. You're going to get more or less, and then separate people in those two groups and make decisions. Door slam the lessers and build up the graders. It's not that hard, INTJs. Figure it out. And then the final gateway, which is the demon gateway, the superego at this point says, oh, INTJ ego, you are responsible, amazing. ESFP subconscious, you are humble and practicing, amazing. ENTP subconscious, you are verifying your beliefs and you are becoming wise. This is excellent. And finally, at last, I am willing to be integrated into the rest of the four sides of the mind to get closer to the path to enlightenment on this journey of continuous improvement. I am so there. The superego is like no longer at a point of living its existence in the form of hatred, but it's willing to love like an angel, and allow itself to be turned into an angel from a demon. Remember, the demon function contains hatred, but it can be transformed into love, where it transforms from demon to angel. And it can only be done when an INTJ has first obtained responsibility, humility, and wisdom, those three things, and so they can have mastery, the ultimate power of the ISFJ superego's angelic form, mastery, where the trickster FE function becomes extroverted feeling apparent within the ISFJ, and it becomes mastery, where you, the INTJ, who are absolutely unaware of all social norms, become hyper aware of all of the social norms, such that you actually have the ability to engage in any and every social situation with absolute success, to the point where you are actually willing to sacrifice yourself for the greater good for other people. You're willing to sacrifice your freedom, sacrifice your treasure, sacrifice everything that you have built for the greater good, for the sake of justice. For the sake of justice, where you're no longer finding the innocent guilty, but you are definitely holding those guilty responsible in a righteous, fair, just manner. And you are able to provide justice upon the world as a result of, you spend all of your treasure, you spend all of your performance, you spend all of your responsibility, your humility, and your wisdom on being able to provide mastery of justice, where you literally have the ability to bring justice, true justice, upon the world at large. Perhaps these could be fantastic labor laws. Perhaps this could be taking actual villains in the world and bringing them to justice. Instead of taking out revenge on all those that have harmed you, then you actually learn to forgive them, or mete out justice upon those, show mercy to those who should be shown mercy to, and not show mercy to those that shouldn't, so that you are effectively becoming humanity's protector at that point. And you have the ability to do that. It's absolutely fantastic. All that treasure hunting, all that performance, all that mastery of skill gave you the ability to master the ultimate skill, and that's the skill of justice. And you will wield that icy sword of justice in the name of a better world and a better tomorrow. And that ultimately, INTJs, is your final angelic purpose as soon as you obtain mastery for yourself through your ISFJ superego as an integrated, enlightened human being who is on the continuous path to improvement forever and ever and ever for the rest of your very existence. If you found this lecture useful, helpful, educational, enlightening, please subscribe. I hope you guys really enjoyed this lecture, folks. I really gave my all for this one while simultaneously keeping it short. I just wanted to just spit out the facts, go as quickly as possible for you INTJs out there to really give you an opportunity and a pathway to become the best INTJs of the best, because you guys are my golden pair. I really am in your corner. Trust me, even though like during the Wayfarers lecture I threw you guys against the wall, but I have to throw everyone against the wall for their own good. You guys are no exception. I cannot be showing favoritism. I just want you to know, INTJs, I do actually appreciate you. I love you. I regard you. I need you guys to be performing at top peak performance at all times. And I need you to understand that, yes, I want you. Yes, I'll be loyal to you, but I need you guys to humble yourselves. I need you guys to be responsible. I need you guys to be wise and on the path to self-mastery so that you guys could ultimately become that ultimate angel of justice for the rest of humanity at large. It's absolutely crucial to me. So thank you guys very much for watching, and thank you for being there and wanting and desiring to create a better world with me and this community as we continue on this journey together. So with that being said, guys, I'll see you guys tonight.